friends. Welcome to another episode of Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Klingenpeel. Online safety these days is a huge issue when it comes to our kids. I don't know about you, but with 4 kids in our house that are on technology, I want to make sure that they are protected, that they are equipped to handle all the issues. So I know today's episode is going to encourage you, equip you, and really prepare you to have conversations with your kids about being smart on technology. So today I have with me Titania Jordan. She is the CMO and Chief Parent Officer at Bark.us. This is an internet safety solution that helps parents and schools keep their children safer across social media, text messages, and email. It's fantastic. I use it in my own home. Even prior to this, I've been using it probably about the last 5 years with my kids. So I can tell you this is a great organization and application to add to your technology. Titania is the co-author of Parenting in a Tech World, offering practical tips, real-world advice from fellow parents, and helpful exercises to walk caregivers through how to nurture a healthy relationship between kids and technology. And just for you all, my friends at Embracing Your Season, she is making this book available to you for free as a digital download. So you can find that in the show notes. Now, make sure you stay tuned to after the interview because I have a few takeaways that I think will benefit you as well. So let's go to my conversation with Titania Jordan on this edition of Embracing Your Season. Well, Titania, thank you so much for joining me today. I love Bark. I use this in my own home. It is something that when I was doing private practice with parents of teens, I highly recommended that as it is such a resource for parents. But I would love for the audience to know a little bit more about that. So why don't you tell us what Bark is all about?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me and for using Bark and for recommending Bark. That is a literal lifesaver. And so, yeah, everybody's like, well, tell us, what is Bark? So Bark launched in 2015, and it's technology that helps keep your kids safer online and in real life. And the way we go about doing that is a few different ways. You can use our app to help with your children's, iPhone or Android devices, school-issued devices in some cases like a Chromebook or an iPad. And we also have a safer smartphone for kids because sometimes the app-based situation just wasn't ideal. And we thought that starting children off on the right foot with just a safe device to begin with was probably the best path. And so, yeah, you can use our app, you can use our smartphone, and we will not only block certain problematic material or filter certain problematic material, but we also will alert you when your children have encountered problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's really important, I think we'll get into it, but whether it's cyberbullying or suicidal ideation or predators or disordered eating, there's so many things that kids encounter online that you might not ever know that they're encountering unless it's brought to your attention, usually not by them. And if you have Bark, by Bark.
Mm-hmm. And that's the funny thing about ours. Well, and we can talk about how do you implement this. I know in my home, the way that we did it is that we explained to our kids, like, your phone is a privilege. Like, we are paying for this and we want you to be able to connect with me and your friends. That's just kind of how they socialize in this generation. But I want to be aware of things that are happening. And so I will go through it. In fact, we wrote up a technology contract of just saying, we're in alignment with this. This is how I'm going to check your stuff. And I always alliterate that it's not because I'm snooping to snoop. Like, I literally do not care about the girl drama that's happening at the lunch table with eighth graders, right? Like, that's not my goal to know who's dating who and whatever. But my goal is to figure out how can I help my kids when they're having hard conversations they can't navigate on their own. And in fact, Bark, it's so great and sensitive at some points because I had texted my high schooler at one point about a vacation and I sent her a link. And because the hotel has a bar within the hotel, It was flagged for alcohol. And initially I panicked. When I got that Bark indication, I was like, oh, she's talking about alcohol. Is she doing alcohol? Your parent mind freaks out a bit. And then it was just that I was like, okay, well, praise God for that. So
Amen.
Help the parents have that, I don't know, just that idea of why should you have Bark on your phone to begin with?
Yeah, great question. If the connected tech that children have access to was inherently safe, you wouldn't need bark.
Yeah.
But it's not. When you hand them over tech that can access the internet or Wi-Fi or even just, mobile devices with the LTE signal, they can connect to the entire world, and the entire world can connect to them. And there's good and there's bad in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the amount of bad that is able to be accessed by your child, either intentionally or unintentionally, is much higher than anyone thinks.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of if you, listen to this or watch this and decide to use bark or not, you do need to know the rate at which children are experiencing harms online. We have an annual report that I can share with you. You can link in your show notes, etc., that just shows you how often kids are experiencing these things, whether it's sexual content or mental health issues. It's through the roof. And so that's why they need bark,
Mm-hmm.
because the internet is not safe. It's like a car without a seatbelt, and you need that seatbelt, and bark is the seatbelt.
So I think that's the question that parents are often like asking. So once they put this on the system, like how do you navigate those conversations with the kids? Like how do you navigate technology safely?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of conversations. It's not just one conversation. And so you make it a part of your life even from before they can read or talk. You model appropriate tech behavior. You spend more time interacting with them and other humans in real life versus from behind a screen. You put the phone down when they come into the room. You have it on silent, or not even with you at the dinner table. You charge devices in the kitchen instead of in the bedroom. I mean, there's so many things you can do just by modeling. And then conversations, when your children do start to access technology, letting them know that we're going to do this in the common areas of the home because tech doesn't belong behind closed doors. Letting them know that sometimes they might encounter really interesting content online that could also maybe be problematic without them even knowing it and could lead to addictions. Talking about porn, but you might not want to talk about porn with your 3 or 4 year old, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you can also talk to them about tricky people. Hey, you might be playing Roblox and there might be somebody chatting with you who seems really, really nice. But when they start to ask you questions that are like, what is your real name? Where do you live? Where you go to school? Again, you might think they're being friendly, but that's a red flag and they're being a tricky person and you need to tell mom or dad. And it's important to emphasize the fact that they are not in trouble. The child is not in trouble. They didn't do anything wrong. And in fact, them coming to tell you about it is a good thing. It's something we reward, something we thank them for. Because I can guarantee you, if your child is afraid to tell you something, if they think that they're going to get punished or lose their access, they are not going to tell you.
Yes, yes, that's good. Man. And you even mentioned tricky people. I'm from the 80s. That's when I was born
Yeah.
and raised. We had the stranger danger, right? Whereas now it's
Yeah.
tricky people. So explain a little bit more about the difference in that, even just language.
Sure. Yeah. When we were growing up, I'm an 80s baby as well. We were concerned about that white van, the stranger on the playground or at the mall, somebody who says, "Oh, your mom and dad told me to come get you." We couldn't use our smartphone to verify because we didn't have one,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we were more worried about in real life dangers. Now, today, children are, I'd say, primarily pretty safe in real life, right? They're either at a school or with a babysitter or at a home. They're really never alone. But in the meantime, they've got this digital access that in many cases is not monitored, is not filtered, has no time limits, has no parental controls. And the predators know that. And there's a lot of them out there, and they're very smart, and they know how to interact with your child, groom your child, which is
Mm.
to build a relationship with them, and to coerce and extort or sextort your child.
Mm-hmm. Which is so terrifying, right? That our kids can be building a relationship with an absolute stranger with the pure motivation to devalue them, to dehumanize them, and to, cause damage on such a deep level. You mentioned pornography. I know that I think if it might be different now, the statistics, but usually the average age that a child is exposed to pornography is around 8 years old. Is that still an accurate stat?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that's absolutely accurate. Which is why it's so important to have these conversations
Mm-hmm.
with them.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear my dogs in the background?
Yep.
Sorry about that. Pardon the pun with the bark. You know, with dogs alert you when there's potential dangers of people nearby, whether it's mailman or burglar.
Yes.
Bark will also do that for you digitally, but they've calmed down now. Yeah, speaking of pornography, yes, children are being exposed to extremely graphic, violent sexual content at a much earlier age than we ever were, at a much more frequent rate. And not only does it affect them immediately, right? Just because of all the negative impacts that exposure has on children,
Mm-hmm.
but it also negatively impacts them long term. It impacts their ability to have a healthy sexual relationship when it is time for them to have one, when they are older and in a consensual monogamous relationship. In fact, I spoke with a neuroscientist recently who encouraged me to spread the word about the fact that, young males, in college and early 20s are struggling with erectile dysfunction now. And they're otherwise physiologically very healthy males. But because of their pornography exposure, they can't experience that fulfillment with a human like they have been experiencing digitally. And that breaks my heart.
Absolutely. And that's where that information needs to it just be broadcasted, because there's still so many people that view pornography as being a harmless interaction, even using it to facilitate their own marriage or sexual relationship with one another. But what they don't understand is there's a biochemical, a physiological, and now an emotional, social relationship in a negative way with this pornography. And here you go, this stat right here, that these young adult males then cannot participate in an intimate relationship due to the fact that it needs overstimulus because of what has been portrayed in pornography. Yeah, and that's what I think breaks my heart with my own kiddos. It's that
Yeah.
they have. I know that. Gosh, I was trying to think. This is a couple of years ago. My youngest is now 11, but like there was a picture, and I think it was off of TikTok. I don't even remember. It wasn't his. I think it was one of those things where I was just scrolling through some of his pictures just to check again, because that's what we do in our home. We check some of the stuff, we walk through it with them. And it was just a picture, and it was of a woman. She was scantily clad. And I was just like, dude, you're like 10 years old. You don't even understand this. And so I had to pull back my emotional reaction, because initially I was panicking as a parent, like,
Yep.
how do I handle this? But then I just started asking questions. So tell me more about this. Like, why did your friend send you this? What do you think this means? And so it ended up being a really good conversation and educating. But it starts with, what is the environment around our kids? How is this even just worldview of sexuality? How do we have intimate relationships? That is damaging unless parents are having those conversations first. And that's what I love about Park, is like it elicits these flags of like, you need to have a conversation. You need to have a conversation. So help those parents out there know they've been notified. There's something pops up on their screen. Their kids have seen this. How do they have that intervention? Do they just sit them down and say, hey, I found this on Bark? Like, what are some of your suggestions?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that. So first of all, we highly recommend telling your child um, that the tech that they're accessing is a tool and it is a privilege that comes with a great deal of responsibility. And use the car analogy or the bike analogy. When you're in a car, you wear a seatbelt. When you ride a bike, you wear a helmet. When you use tech, we're going to have bark. So set that stage for like, we have safety measures in place, and not necessarily because I don't trust you, even though you are a child, you're going to make mistakes. We don't trust the entire world having access to you. So set the stage to let them know there is, safety measures in place on their tech. And then inevitably you'll get an alert about something, and you've got to decide, what are the majors that you're going to major on, and what are the things you're going to learn about but kind of let go. Because you can't talk, I mean, you can, but I don't recommend talking about everything, right? If I talk to my son about every single bad word alert that I got, on the text threads with 20 of his friends,
Yes,
like,
yes.
at some point that will just turn you off,
Mm-hmm.
So, we do talk about the big things. And so when it is time for a big thing, obviously you got to remain calm. If it's pornography, for example, it depends on the context, right? Did somebody send them something? Was it unwanted? Was it wanted? Did they send something? Did they encounter something? And depending on what it is, you've got to talk about either the legal ramifications of CSAM, child sexual abuse material. Any photo or video of somebody under the age of 18 that is nude is illegal material. It is against the law. In some states, it's a felony. Hopefully, it's a felony in every state, but I can't, not sure about that. Not a lawyer. But so there's that problem. But then if you're talking about, content that you're consuming, I guess, of adults, that is pornographic in nature, again, just letting them know, like, there's no shame. You're not in trouble. It's very normal for you to be curious about the human body and what our bodies do and the beautiful, wonderful elements of, pleasure and procreation. But at the same time, we have to be careful because sometimes the things that we consume can harm us, even if we don't notice it in the short term. And, there's great resources out there to help with that, whether it's Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, the book by Defend Young Minds. Also, Protect Young Eyes is an amazing site run by Chris McKenna, a great dad of 4 who has been open publicly about his own journey to overcome pornography exposure. And there's also a website called Fight the New Drug, ftnd.org. So you don't have to do this alone, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. And we're going to add those in the show notes as well, because I really want our audience to gain those resources. It's so important to know you're not doing this on your own. You don't have to create any of these resources by yourself, right? Like, that is already done for you because people have already lived this journey and they want to supply that. I love that. So one of the interesting things that I found that when we first started using this several years ago, my now 18-year-old, we used this in middle school for her, but her friends, the way that she would even talk to her friends and warn them, my mom is going to read this, so don't talk about this with, in this thread, that kind of thing, because my mom has this access. But there's that social relationship with their peers that they feel either embarrassed or they feel overwhelmed that their parents are reading the information. So help parents out there have that conversation with their kids who might be embarrassed that their parents are using something like Bark or checking their texts.
That's not always easy, right? I mean, kids get embarrassed about all kinds of things.
They sure do.
Even things like aren't embarrassing, right?
Yeah.
Like when your kid becomes a teenager, just being seen with you is embarrassing.
It's true. Isn't that crazy? When did that happen? I feel like I'm a cool mom. And every time I say that, my kids are like, Mom, you saying you're a cool mom means you're not a cool mom. I was like, nope, I have a shirt to prove it, guys. It says I'm a cool mom.
Oh my gosh. We're right there with you. Right there with you. But I digress. So, I think it's a good thing for kids to know that there's some form of adult supervision and care. It just is what it is. And you should not be apologetic about it at all. Our kids need to know that they are loved and we are their protectors. We're there to help them become responsible digital natives. And you can say that one of the reasons why you're using Bark instead of something else is because Bark actually gives them way more privacy. And there's other things out there that will be really intrusive, obtrusive, super just invading of privacy and like not helpful. Bark is there just to, alert to problems, to dangers that any child, if they're being honest, would agree that a parent needs to know about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the way that I describe it with my kiddos too is like, this is, again, I don't need to know all of these details, and I will not bring to attention all the things that I read. And I know that you want to be autonomous. I know you want to have your own life, and I will allow that. But when it gets to those places, and I'm a counselor and my kids know that. So my area is actually adolescence. So they know I have seen things. And there is that element. It makes me a little more paranoid probably than most parents because I'm more aware of certain things. But it's always back to the conversation of I want you to be equipped and protected and prepared. And so if you have a friend that comes to you, this happened recently, actually, my oldest was having a conversation with her friend who was self-harming using cutting behavior. My daughter, we've had those conversations. So she felt as equipped as a 17-year-old can be equipped, right, to navigate that.
Yeah.
But she was also able to say, like, can I talk to my mom about this? Because my mom will be able to help you in these ways. ways. So because we've had conversations since she was young about parents can help you. They're not going to dominate and dictate, but they're going to help you navigate some of those hard conversations. I think that built the foundation where she is now, where some of those really challenging, hard things are happening. And she knows she's not alone in navigating that. So I know that's an
I love
area
that.
that we like to walk alongside with our kids. But what about the parents who, I know there's been pushback every time I mention something like this, where they feel like their kids need privacy. What do you
Mm.
say to them?
Yeah, I would say that um, there's a reason why your child doesn't live on their own yet. They don't have their own apartment with only one key to that apartment. They need adult supervision. You also don't need to be, following them everywhere they go. Like, can they use the restroom by themselves? Absolutely. There's appropriate level of privacy, and then there's being an irresponsible parent. And if you give your child unfettered, unmonitored, unrestricted access to the World Wide Web at 8, 9, 10,
Mhm.
11, 12 years old, you're not being a responsible parent. And I say that not from a place of judgment, but from a place of, I did that. I
Mhm.
made that mistake. And I wish I hadn't. I
Mhm.
wish I could go back in time and undo the damage from that.
Mhm.
So don't don't worry about your child's privacy, especially when they're younger. Worry about their mental and physical health.
That's so good. That is what is valuable here, right? Yes, it's the longevity of their health in a holistic way. Well,
Yeah.
I would love people to find out more information, not only about Bark, but also about you. I know you've written a book, so I would love for them to connect with you. Where can they find that information?
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about Bark, go to www.bark.us. If you want to connect with me, I've got a super unique name. You can just Google Titania Jordan and you will find me because I am putting out content on all the places all the time, especially Instagram. Like Instagram Reels are my jam.
Wow. Okay. Good stuff. Well, definitely. I'm going to have to check that out as well. Well, Titania, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been so informative, and I know my listeners are going to really appreciate it. Again, check out all the resources she mentioned in our show notes. And I know that you guys are going to be blessed by this content. So thanks for joining us. All right, friends. I know that you probably loved that conversation with Titania, right? Like, how cool is Bark? Now, we know that we as parents still need to be having these conversations with our kids. Yes, we get the flags. Yes, we get the notifications that they're talking about things or that they're involved in conversations that involve topics that we don't necessarily want our kids to navigate on their own. That's the cool thing about this application. But what we're talking about today is so much deeper and so much more broad. We're talking about protecting and equipping our kids to navigate technology. Technology is here to stay, friends. It is. It's we are the first generation of parents that are raising kids who have only known personal devices. This is why resources like this and all the other resources she mentioned, which again will be in the show notes, will be so beneficial for you because we want to make sure that you are having the conversations. Yes, we want you to implement some of these things. We want you to create structure in your home. But most of all, we want to make sure that your kids feel like you support them, that you love them, and that they can come to you about all the things that they can be experiencing, whether themselves personally or in their social relationships. So, anytime that your kid is on technology, be aware that they're exposed to things that you probably don't think is age appropriate. So, starting off a conversation of, so what's on TikTok right now? What's the latest theme or trend? What are things that you're into, or what are things that are really silly or even stupid right now? Opening up that conversation allows your kid to know that you're interested in what they're interested in. So as they start rambling on about Minecraft or the new dance that's out there, you may not be interested, let's be honest, but it helps connect you with them on a way that they're sharing and opening up their life, what they're experiencing on technology. When we have that foundation of communication, that then allows them to trust us to come to us for maybe some of those harder things. Even bringing it up, knowing that our kids are probably experiencing friends that have depression or anxiety, friends that are being bullied, friends that are experiencing drug, alcohol, self harm, all of these problematic behaviors. Asking our kids those questions, I think, can really establish a level of trust that they can come to you when their friends or them themselves are struggling with these areas. So open the conversation with your kids And hopefully that will bear fruit in such a way that they come to you about some of those hard things. Now, let's talk about when you start implementing an application like Bark on the phone. Your kids may not be into that. Let's be honest. No one wants to be monitored, even kids. But what we talk about it, the way that we phrase it with them is that it's all about protection. We want to provide them the opportunity to be on technology, but it's still a privilege. They're exposed to things that they shouldn't probably be exposed to, and you can't be there to help them navigate it all the time. So this isn't so much restriction as it is protection. Our goal is to enable them so that they can make critical choices about what they're exposed to. So she mentioned a book talking about good pictures, bad pictures, right? This is such a beautiful thing to teach our kids when they're young, is that just because it's there in front of us does not mean that we have to look at it, that we have to pursue it, or to allow it to be a part of our lives. We teach them that critical eye to look at things in such a way as, is this good for me or is this not good for me? And that goes across the board as they get older. Discussing things about what's appropriate to look at and what's not appropriate to look at. These are conversations to have with your kids, but it's to equip them so they can make the decision on their own. Because if we're not having it in our homes right now, when they go off to college and are living autonomous lives, they won't know how to be a critical thinker in that way. So again, we're not providing structure just to eliminate this stuff. We're providing structure to equip them to live on their own in a healthy way. I love the difference between stranger danger and tricky people. We get to help our kids realize that though they need to respect other people, especially elders, adults, but it doesn't mean that we have to trust them intuitively from the get-go, because there are unfortunately people in this world that want to have bad intent that could hurt our kids. So we treat them, or we teach them ways to be critical thinkers. We teach them to not share in abundance information that is personal in nature, so that allows location or ways that this person can come and find them, maybe in person. So I've been using Bark, as you know, for several years now. Well, let me tell you a story how this has just been so beneficial for me. It was one time where I picked up on something that my daughter was having a conversation with a friend. This friend was using language like sadness and hopelessness and being overwhelmed. And that to me obviously sent up a red flag for Bark, which then allowed me to start having conversations with my daughter. And so when I brought it to my daughter and I said, so what's going on with your friend? Like, I know maybe she's in a tough place right now. Well, her parents were going through a divorce and she was actually in a depression. My daughter didn't recognize that that's what that meant. But when I started preparing her to be a support to this friend, she and I were then able to discuss, how can you support your friend? How can you love her well? And it actually got to the point where as Haley was becoming more of a support for this friend, we realized that the friend was actually having much darker thoughts than just the sadness and the depression. In fact, we were able to have an intervention with her parents at one point to get this child to go to counseling. And her life is so much for the better. She's worked through this. She has grieved the divorce, and now she is a healthy adult, getting ready to graduate high school, actually. And so because of that notification and because of the conversation I was able to have with my daughter, I enabled her and I encouraged her, but I also equipped her so that she can be there for her friend. And she understood that I was her advocate as well. And she was able to help this young girl's life in such a beautiful, tangible way that brought hope. And that's what it's all about, right, friends? We want to equip and advocate for our kids so that not only they can support the others in their life, but also be a healthy place for themselves. So again, huge advocate for this Bark application, but more of an advocate of you having conversations with your kids at home, even the hard ones, because I guarantee you the fruit is going to be beautiful and it's going to bring health out of your relationship. Thanks for joining me today for another episode of Embracing Your Season. I would love to connect with you. Maybe you have some thoughts of who you would like to see on the show. Maybe you have topics you want us to discuss here. So please email me at paigeklingenpeel@gmail.com. Again, that's paigeklingenpeel@gmail.com. Of course, continue to tune in every week as we have new episodes where we discuss ways that we can equip and encourage you both inside your home and out. We'll see you next time.